Well, it was like my mother called it, the vegetable bin. A chest that would hold things on top. You lifted the top, and you would store things in it. And so my father put old rags and old newspapers and on the top. So if you lifted it, didn't look very nice. You wouldn't want to go through it. But underneath, he had built two little benches, or two little seats, and a potty. And when they went to work, they left with us whatever they had, some water and whatever bread they had. And they would put us into this piece of furniture and put it against the wall and go to work. If you ask me today, how did we do this? It's very hard for me to explain it because having grandchildren, it's not that easy to keep children quiet. But it was a different time and place. Children in Europe were supposed to be seen and not heard. And as my mother later on in life tried to explain, she told everyone that she had two very obedient daughters. And I think we knew. We grew up very fast and realized this was a matter of life and death, that we had to be quiet, that we couldn't talk just any time we wanted to. Once we were in there, we had to be quiet. There were times that, because when everybody went to work, when all the older people or able people had to go to work, and the Germans would come through the building, and you could hear them walking up the stairs. And they came into the room. You could hear them talking, and yet we weren't found. I always think back, had they brought with them the German dogs, shepherds, of course we would have been found. But somebody was looking over us, and they didn't. And my parents would come back, and of course, at night, we'd be out with them in the room. But there were many things that you just cannot explain, that for some reason, I think the Almighty was looking over us.
Well, he made this a vegetable bin that had, I thought it was like old vegetables, onions and carrots and potatoes on the top. And it was empty in the back. And my sister Ann and I used to hide back there during the day when they went to work. And we used to sit there, and they were gone 5 or 6 hours at a time, at least. We would just sit in the back, and if we heard we used to run back then when we heard noises coming up the steps. The Germans used to come with their boots, you know how they walk, and with their dog sniffing, and we heard footsteps. We used to run in there real quick and used to hide and keep quiet. And we were just trained to do that. So that's how we survived during the day.
Sometimes I used to go out in the backyard, and I used to play. I used to have imaginary friends. I had no friends. For 2 years, I never played with anyone. I don't even remember playing with her daughters because I think that they were substantially older than I was. And I would make up games. Sometimes I remember I would cut out newspaper and I would make like handbags out of them, and I don't know where it came from at the time. I don't, but I used to have to make up things. I had nobody to play with.
You were so young, but yet you were old enough to be afraid.
Yes, very much so, and especially when the Nazis paraded down the street. They used to really like to do that because I assumed as I got older that it was intimidating. And apparently all the neighbors had to keep their doors open. And so the neighbor had to keep her door open and stand in the front of their house. And I remember I had to hide in the outhouse.
The bathroom in the back?
Right.
Outside?
Outside, in the outhouse. There was no bathroom inside that I remember in the house. Most people. But it was a small structure made out of, I guess, 2x4 plywood. And I remember hiding, and there was a crack. I guess one of the boards was broken, had a piece missing, and I remember being able to watch through the crack. It was a straight view to the front, and I was so scared. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I knew that I was scared. And I remember going to the furthest little corner of this outhouse, absolutely petrified. And then I heard this pussycat.
A pussycat?
A pussycat. Meowing. And I had no idea how this pussycat got there. And I remember I crawled out on my hands and knees. And I grabbed the pussycat. And I think I grabbed that pussycat. Number one, I didn't want anything to happen to it. But number two, it was something to hold. I had nobody to make me feel better. I had no one to reassure me that it was going to be okay. So it was, I think I held on to that pussycat for dear life because it was so frightening. And that was my existence for 2 years.
And today, so many years later, when you turn on the TV and see a documentary of the Nazis marching down the street,
I can't stand it. I really cannot stand it. I literally curse at them. To this day, I curse at them. In French.
Yes, my daddy and my mother found somebody to find us some shelter in this woman's house. And there was a mother and a daughter, and they took us in, and they told them we were some relatives that coming to visit. And we lived with them like relatives, they're like Christians. Me being younger, I mean, I lived like they did immediately. I thought I was Catholic like they are. I went to church with them. I had an Easter basket. I did everything they did. And when you live that way, you have to have everything. You have to have the rosary. You have to have the prayer book. You have to have the beads. And I mean, I knew those prayers by heart just like they did. So this was a time in my life where you influence very easily that age, that if you do that, that's what you believe. And I believed until after the war that I was a Christian. I did not know I was Jewish. Because my parents didn't tell me I was Jewish because they didn't want me to say anything that would give them any suspicion of our family, because we were all living there.
So my mother would take my sister out. My father found a job and he went to work. And my mother would take my sister out and make believe, they did go to church and all go shopping and all.